It's a busy totally at the Euro, of course. We've got James Horncastle coming up on the line from Leipzig, looking ahead to Italy's big clash with Croatia. Seb Stafford-Bloor in Munich. There's Kieran Canning, who's all over Scotland, Hungary, and Stuttgart, where it is indeed all over for Scotland. And right now, also in Germany, Dom Fifield, who's in Frankfurt. Hey, Dom.
How are you doing, James?
Very good, thank you. Thank you for being with us this evening, Dom.
That's absolute pleasure. I would show you the Blade Runner skyline behind me, but hotel rooms don't work like that, do they? Not with reflections, anyway.
No. Picture it, though, listener. Meanwhile, here in the studio, minding the fort, back in sunny London, Adrian Clarke.
It's good to be here.
Certainly is. Dom, it's your first time on totally at the Euro, but you've been out there since the start?
I have, yes. I arrived here the day before. It's been thoroughly enjoyable. It has felt like a proper festival of football. Look, the fans really getting into it. I think we're seeing fantastic crowds. We're seeing a load of supporters from every single country involved, which has been fantastic. Really, really good to see. I could do with England picking up a bit just to raise the mood. It feels a bit familiar at the moment. It feels a bit like a throwback to my days covering England prior to Russia, but fingers crossed they do. And it's been great. It's been great.
What's been your favourite thing so far?
Oh wow. Well, not the trains, but everybody's probably whinging about the trains. What's been my favourite? I think the atmosphere. I mean, I've in and outside the stadia, it's been reminiscent of 2006. In many ways, it's maybe not quite as polished as 2006, but having so many fans from so many all the countries here. In fact, I think we're getting something like 10,000 in every ground from each, representing each country involved in the games, which is incredible. The Germans have really brought into it. I arrived at the day before, and it didn't necessarily feel as if a major football tournament was going to kick off. It wasn't quite the excitement really wasn't there. But actually, as soon as that first game started and Germany rolled over Scotland, the locals got really involved, and suddenly this flood of fans came into the country, and it's been brilliant since. It's properly uplifting the atmosphere around all the cities.
Magnificent. I'd say the atmosphere's been great here in the studio as well for us, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Been having a great time. All right.
Not at all jealous.
So, Sunday night, here's what happened in Group A, the final group stage games for that quartet of teams. In Frankfurt, late equaliser from Nicholas Füllkrug saw Germany drawing 1-1 with Switzerland to win the group. In Stuttgart, meanwhile, Scotland lost 1-0 to Hungary and are out of the Euros. The late Hungary goal coming at the end of 10 minutes added on after a serious head injury to Hungary's Barnabas Varga, who's involved in a collision with Scottish keeper Angus Gunn. As we record, he's described as stable and conscious, thankfully, by the Hungarian FA. All right, it is with Scotland-Hungary that we begin this evening, Scotland's final game at this Euro. Hungary 1, Scotland 0. The Hungarians taking third place in the group from Steve Clarke's side. Kieran Canning is on the line. Kieran, a tough result and a tough watch as well.
Yeah, football bloody hell, I think another Scotsman once said.
In terms of Scotland's performance, things had looked a lot more enterprising in the draw with Switzerland in the previous match, but all of that enterprise vanished for this game. Why?
Yeah, I think it was a bit similar to the last Euros in the sense that the second game they drew with England and were a bit more purposeful, putting a real performance, and then it kind of fell flat in the third game against Croatia. Tonight, I was a bit surprised by both sides, to be honest, that they both seem to be kind of waiting for the other team to have to go for it. I mean, Hungary really sat off Scotland in the first half. Scotland had over 60% possession. Now, they weren't going anywhere with it. A huge amount of those passes were sideways and backwards. But Hungary were also kind of waiting until that sort of frantic finale that we had at the end when both sides went for it. And that's when chances started to come. There had been practically none in the first sort of 70 or 80 minutes. Two things. Firstly, the players looked knackered. I think they they gave absolutely everything to it. But you're seeing a Scotland team that are absolutely at the limit, so both physically and technically at this level, that having put in big physical efforts against Germany and Switzerland, even though in the case of the Germany game, it was chasing shadows for most of the match. They didn't have the sort of energy reserves there to press high and really try and go for the game, even though they needed to win. And they just don't have the depth to make the changes necessary. And I think there will be criticism of Steve Clarke in terms of how late he left making any changes tonight. I think it was sort of crying out for at least Ryan Christie and Stuart Armstrong to come on earlier than they did. But there is also a realization that, he's very limited in terms of the players he's working with at this level. And Scotland don't have the depth to be able to cope with losing a Tierney, losing both right backs that would have been in the squad. Lewis Ferguson, I'm sure you're aware, James had a great season in Italy. And so when he's working with that sort of smaller pool of players, they just look sort of physically shot tonight.
Yeah, Kieran, I think obviously there is a lack of quality in the Scotland squad, but also I thought maybe a slight lack of ambition on the night. One of the very few forward runs that Scottish player made during the game came from Stuart Armstrong. He gets in behind, and then there's a very, very strong claim for a penalty kick. What's your take on that? Because I wonder if the referee thought that Armstrong actually fouled the Hungarian defender.
I think it's a penalty, but I'm not entirely sure if Armstrong's offside. I thought in the first instance that he might have been. If he's onside, then I think, it's a really big claim. I also kind of wonder, though, if the referee had in his mind the Hungarian penalty check that went on just beforehand because of the Vargas injury, that hadn't been given. And, quite often referees like to sort of balance those things out. But yeah, if he was onside, then I think it was a very strong claim. But yeah, that's, in terms of what you're saying there, at least Armstrong and Christie, I felt, are both players that have got a goal in them and have got a bit of energy about them. And it was really crying out for that. And one of the biggest issues, I think, was that with Tierney being out, there was no one in that back three that was really comfortable in taking a sort of risky pass and playing a pass between the lines. So that's why in the first half, or the first sort of 60 minutes, it really was very much sort of tippy-tappy, sideways, backwards. No one wanted to take a risk. No one wanted to make the mistake that Anthony Ralston made the other night, for example. And that's why I think it was really sort of insipid performance by Scotland.
Scotland put out of the misery in the 99th minute by Kevin Sorbot in a Hungarian breakaway move, and that sees Hungary claiming third spot in the group. Broadly speaking then, as Scotland return home, Kieran, is it time to adopt the Gordon Strachan protocol? You recall when Strachan identified that genetically the Scots lag behind and they should get big women and men together and see what they can do.
I thought you might have seen that in the Hungary team. And my biggest fear was that we were going to be put out by the most Scottish-looking man alive when Martin Adam came on. But yeah, I think that there is a point there in terms of, physically Scotland do seem not as physically powerful or as fast as a lot of teams you see at this level. I think, for example, Lawrence Shankland came on tonight with about 25 minutes to go. And there has been a bit of clamour for him to get more of a run because of his form in Scotland, but you see him at that level and he just physically doesn't have the height or the pace to run in behind that you need at this level, and that's why Steve Clarke's chosen Shea Adams ahead of him. So maybe Gordon Strachan was onto something, but it might take a few generations for that to turn around.
Kieran Canning. Don Pfeiffer, what do you think? Should it have been a penalty?
Stuart Armstrong?
Yeah.
No,
why not?
I thought he was looking for it.
He was, but he found it, surely.
I looked at that and thought it would have been incredibly soft penalty to have given. I thought. I agree with Kieran. The lack of attacking endeavour really from Scotland was hugely disappointing. You consider that Grant Hanley's had their best opportunity, and that came just before Hungary went and scored their 100th minute winner. It rather sums them up. It was a shame. Yet another story of what might have been.
On the penalty, I did think that Willie Auburn's kind of rueful smile as he ran away, kind of sheepish grin, did tell a bit of a story. But hey, what about the winning goal? Because just when it looked like no one would ever sure, Adrian.
Yeah, it was a brilliant counter-attack, wasn't it? I think Hungary's tactics from the get-go were to sit off, draw Scotland onto them so that they could attack at pace in behind, and they did create the best chances. I think once Andy Robertson went off towards the end, I think it was a minute from time, that's where they really made hay down that right hand side. That's where the counter ended up. And Shawbot hit the post, didn't he? That just a couple of minutes before then, and for the goal itself, I thought it was a magnificent counter attack. The penultimate pass for me was sensational to release the guy on the right, and there was a lovely cutback, wasn't there, for Shawbot, who tucked it away beautifully. It was a classic counter attack goal, and I think on the balance of play, Hungary absolutely deserved it. I did. I thought Scotland were. They played with the handbrake on for far too long in that game. Managers always in these big games, or almost always, they talk about let's not have any regrets, boys. Come on, let's give everything. And we, I've heard Andy Robertson's interview afterwards. We gave everything. I would say, did you? Because they went for it at the end and they did get carved open. But I felt that during the course of the game, from that more solid defensive base, when they got the back four in place, did we see McGinn and McTominay run beyond the last man enough? And I think the answer is no. I think everything was sideways and backwards and a little bit too safe.
I know what Adrian's saying, and it is disappointing. It's a massive anticlimax, obviously, given this was their opportunity to make history. But I just wonder whether that group had it in them anyway to be more expansive. When they did throw caution to the wind and actually went for it, Hungary actually ripped them to pieces. I mean, there were a lot of opportunities towards the end there. Hungary had made half chances up to them, really, but the last 15 minutes, I know they were going for it as well because they needed a victory to get through. But when Scotland were braver, they were also far more vulnerable and far more fragile, and actually Hungary looked even better in that period.
It's a fair point. All right, well, Hungary take third place, which means they'll have a nervous wait to find out if their record qualifies them for the last 16. As for the top two spots, well, that was decided by the game in Frankfurt between Switzerland and Germany. With more on that, a 1-1 draw between the hosts and the Swiss, here's Seb Stafford-Bloor. Seb, you were there to see Germany winning the group with that late equaliser from St. Nicholas.
Yeah, Jimbo, it wasn't the most convincing Germany performance, and they really needed that goal. It didn't seem like they were going to manufacture the chance that they really needed all the way through the second half. And in the end, it was just a big cross and let's be fair, an absolutely fantastic header that wins them the group. Ironically, might have put them on the wrong side of the draw in terms of placing amongst all the best teams in the competition, but still, wonderful moment.
All right, I should ask, given the echoey audio coming through there from Frankfurt, where are you, Seb?
Jimbo, I'm in a stairwell in the Waldstadion, and you can maybe hear some Germany fans walking down outside, trying to get out of the ground. And we've got journalists, press conferences, mixed zones, all sorts going on around me.
Okay, what kind of reaction do you think is going on in those mixed zones and press conferences to the game, which, as you say, wasn't the most convincing from Germany? They did have an early goal, they thought, from Andrik, which was disallowed. Then Switzerland's Dan and Doy gave the, I would call them visitors, really, the lead. And it wasn't until the 92nd minute that Germany finally found the goal which sees them top the group.
I think a lot of the questions will focus on the things that didn't work, actually. Once the euphoria dies off of the kind of the relief, Toni Kroos didn't play all that well. Jamal Musiala started really well for about 25, 30 minutes and then sort of faded. Florian Wirtz didn't have a very good game. I think one of the big issues, though, is the centre-back pairing. Jonathan Tah was substituted after about 16 minutes on. He was on the yellow card, which means that he's out of the last 16 game. Nevertheless, he struggled a little bit with some of the pace and movement around him, and his partnership with Antonio Rudiger. Whilst neither player was entirely to blame for it looking a little bit fragile, didn't have the kind of security that has done in previous games. And it was one of those nights actually when you remember that at club level, Jonathan Tah plays in a back three and has that extra security around him. Didn't look particularly safe tonight, and there won't be anything particularly accusatory because 1-1 draws don't deserve it, and Germany have topped the group and they're through and they're unbeaten. Nevertheless, I think there will be a little bit of focus on what happens next and some of the decisions that Julian Nagelsmann might have to make.
The decision that he made in terms of the lineup is one that I'm sure raises eyebrows. Going with exactly the same team for the third game in a row. You mentioned 1 or 2 players looking a little bit pooped already, and 4 players were already on yellows. And as you mentioned, Tar now out of the first knockout game.
Yeah, he justified this the night before the game by saying, listen, we're trying to find some chemistry here and haven't been together very long as a side. And so the more time this group of players spends together, the better. And I kind of happen to agree with him. And he even said, look, there might be injuries, there might be suspensions, but that's just a risk we're going to have to take because we're only 9 months into this cycle. The other thing, Jimbo, is there was a bit of fatigue, yes, but also the pitch in Frankfurt has been quite controversial, as England fans will remember. And had a few weird moments this evening. It was a bit slippery. Musiala had trouble finding his feet and keeping his feet. Toni Kroos too. So that might have played into things. But it was, the weakest of all 3 performances, probably.
Seb Stafford-Bloor. Adrian, what has Seb not told us about this game?
He's told us plenty. There's no doubt about that. I just want to expand on what he said about the defence. I think that he said that Jonathan Tah was having a difficult evening anyway, and I thought that myself as well. I think ahead of the tournament, a lot of people that have seen plenty of Nagelsmann's Germany said, we don't have them down as winners because the back four is a little bit disjointed. Defensively, they're not the strongest. And I do think that Switzerland caused them problems. You see it for the goal. Kimmich isn't in the right back spot. He's somewhere else. Rudiger doesn't know whether to stay or go. He's caught between 2 stools. And then Tar lets Ndoye get goal side of him to score. So that was one. And then, of course, there was another goal that they scored in the second half from Vargas that was, very, very narrow offside decision where they sliced open Germany. So I think that it was a night that probably just puts a little bit more realism on Germany's quest to win the Euros. They looked a little bit short tonight defensively.
Okay, as group winners, they will be facing the runner-up of Group C, England's group. England currently leading that group ahead of their clash with Slovenia. So as it stands, it'll actually be Denmark that Germany will be taking on. England on 4 points, Denmark on 2, Slovenia on 2, and Serbia on just the 1. Switzerland, meanwhile, as runners-up of Group A, will face the runners-up of Group B in Berlin next Saturday. Group B is Spain, Italy, Albania, and Croatia. Dom, the Swiss, their penchant for conceding late goals aside, what are your thoughts?
They must be a horribly awkward team to play against. There's so much experience in that core. Sommer in goal, Rodriguez, Akanji, Fabian Schär, Granit Xhaka. Xhaka was superb tonight. He looks as if he's brought all that form from Leverkusen into the Euros. Could have doubled the lead very late on. Great save from Manuel Neuer. They just look a real handful. They're not going to be particularly expansive, I'm sure, but they'll be difficult to break down. And as Clarke there says, Dan Ndoye was a real handful. I've not seen Antonio Rudiger look that discomforted for a long time. He was really struggling to keep hold of this fella, and they've got a threat. It may be a threat that only flares sporadically, but on the counter and difficult to break down. I think that Italy and Spain will be looking at that slightly nervously.
Spain won't be, because they won't be facing them, but Italy might. We'll be talking about the chances of that next. Monday night brings Group B to a conclusion. Listener, Spain have topped the group, having spanked Croatia 3-0, and then somehow only winning 1-0 against a fairly spanny Italy. Italy lie second, while spunky Albania lie third, having themselves given Italy a little bit of a scare in the first game, and then holding fourth place Croatia to a 2-2 draw in their second. Well, on Monday, for their third game, Albania will face Spain. The Albanians could still finish second in the group, earning them a last 16 match with Switzerland, but it would take a bit of a miracle because they'd have to beat Spain and also hope the other result goes their way. The other game being Italy-Croatia, and that has, everything riding on it. Croatia have to beat Italy to go through. For Italy, a draw is enough to see them through in second. In Leipzig, ahead of the game, here's James Horncastle. You're currently sat in front of a big depiction of the bracket. Italy's presence in future games therein is very much in doubt after their battering by Spain on Thursday. What's the mood been there among the Italian manager and press?
Well, I think actually the criticism has been quite mild on the basis that I think that over the last decade, Spain have done that to Italy on a number of occasions, be it in the Euro 2012 final and even 3 years ago in the semi-final where Italy prevailed in a penalty shootout. They were outplayed by Spain. So, as Gigi Buffon was saying yesterday, and Buffon's just standing over there, he said that, we weren't a 9 out of 10 when we beat Albania, and we're not a 4 out of 10 after losing to Spain. But a lot of questions about whether Spalletti's going to change things up. So he's just spoken to us. He says he probably got a few things wrong against Spain, particularly when it came to how fresh the players were, because they were clearly sluggish and weren't able to cope with Spain's tempo. So it is going to be a team that, if they don't change formation, I think they are going to change personnel. But yeah, I mean, as Alessandro Bastoni was just saying, and we had the joy of speaking or being at a Bastoni press conference before the Inter Champions League final when they played Man City. He was like, there's no place for fear in football. You should be afraid of being diagnosed with an illness, but in terms of sort of going out and playing, we're not scared of Croatia. So bring it on. But it is very much it's not in or out, because they can obviously qualify third, but they want to finish second and be in Berlin, I think, for that next round.
Croatia, semi-finalists at a World Cup 18 months ago that the Italians failed to even qualify for. Which are the personnel changes that you anticipate Spalletti making?
Federico Di Marco has been training away from the rest of the team, so there was an expectation that he would drop out of the team. But Spalletti has basically told Gazzetta dello Sport they got the story wrong, that he's not out of the picture. He might play. He has recovered. He has a fitness test tomorrow. Does Spalletti change things up in midfield? Yeah, he really likes Nicolo Fagioli. Fagioli, who was brought into the 26-man squad, having played, I think, 90 minutes in 2024 after being banned for 7 months for betting on football. And so it looks like Spalletti might gamble on him. And then there's a lot of focus on Scamacca as well. Scamacca has only scored 1 goal for Italy since he's been brought into the senior setup. And while he had his moments against Albania, Spalletti keeps kind of using the stick more than the carrot with him, and in terms of saying he's lazy, he doesn't press enough. So do we see Retegui come in, who's had he's got a very good goal record for Italy, I think 4 goals in 6 games. So we'll have to see if those are the changes he has in mind.
If he'll respond to the call of duty, yes, indeed. Fagioli, bringing a player in who's just served a long ban for betting offences into a major international tournament, has that ever worked before for Italy?
You're alluding to 1982, aren't you? Paolo Rossi, who was in the wrong place at the wrong time, I think, when someone was not allegedly, fixing a game. So that did work very well. But yeah, Paolo Rossi is a goal scorer, and boy, could they use a player like Paolo Rossi right now, someone who could put the ball in the back of the net. But Fagioli is, since he's been serving the 7-month ban, he essentially put his betting addiction down to being bored and just being on his phone all the time. So instead, he's taking up ping pong, and apparently he's a mighty ping pong player, as was Spalletti back in the day. Spalletti was one of Italy's best ping pong players. And so I'm not sure he's going to select him on that basis alone. But yes, Spalletti certainly rates Fagioli as being one of the top talents to emerge in Italian football.
They weren't 9 out of 10 in the first game, and they weren't 4 out of 10 in the second. What mark would you give Italy, though, so far?
I would give them a 6.5, I think. Because if you forget about Di Marco literally throwing it in, after 11 seconds against Albania. They played really well in that game. Yes, they risked conceding a goal at the end. Donnarumma made a big save, and you could say that maybe Donnarumma's been their best player so far. You know, not only with big save he made at the end against Albania, but those 8 saves he made against Spain. But I think the thing to remember is that Italy remain a work in progress. You know, Spalletti hasn't been in the job for a year. He's called up players who have only recently been capped in the warm-up games. There's quite a lot of inexperience. And, you know, the surprising thing to me, James, was that before the Spain game, he said, this is what's going to happen if we are unable to play our football. And everything he said happened, you know, and he did it anyway. And, you know, I don't think he will change his approach, his principles tomorrow when they play Croatia. He did say they need to be a bit more resilient and maybe need to be a bit uglier against Croatia. But I think overall, he's going to keep working on the guidelines that he's set over the last 9 months, which is he wants the team to play high up the pitch, be able to control the ball, and dominate games and create lots of chances. It's just whether are the players ready to do that at this moment in time, because it did feel a little bit against Spain that they were sent out as lambs to the slaughter to a little bit. I mean, poor old Giovanni Di Lorenzo 1v1 against Nico Williams. You know, I mean, again, that has been the focus of today's press conference. You know, how is Giovanni Di Lorenzo after being beaten 11 times by Nico Williams? You know, can he pick himself up after that? So yeah, it still feels like this is a very embryonic Italy team, in contrast with the one that won the Euros 3 years ago, which was what has still got the longest unbeaten run in international football, something that Mancini had worked on for 2 years. This is still very much a kind of work in progress.
James Horncastle in Leipzig. Adrian, give us a scary stat from an Italian perspective about Croatia.
It is scary because they've met 8 times and they have failed to beat Croatia, Italy, in each of those eight encounters. So it's a bogey team. It is a proper bogey team for Italy. And I do think that this is a dangerous game for them. I agree with James. They are a work in progress. Croatia are not a work in progress. They've got a team that's been together for a long time, maybe too long in some sense, maybe with the midfield. That might be shaken up a little bit from Croatia's point of view. But they're the XG kings of the tournament so far. Croatia, yeah. They've had the most shots. They've had the highest XG. They've just not brought their shooting boots. They've at both ends of the pitch, they've failed to score as many as XG says they should, and at the other end, they've conceded more than they should have done. So you know, if that is to balance itself out, they're going to be a handful for Italy in this game. I think this is set up beautifully. I really do.
For Croatia,
well, just for a very, very competitive game. I think that the bookmakers make Italy fairly strong favourites, but I don't really see it that way. I see this is certainly more of a 50-50.
All right. A draw is enough for Italy, which is maybe a slightly dangerous thing for that team to know ahead of the match. Dom, do you have strong feelings about this?
Not really. I think it's an intriguing game. I've looked at Croatia and it just looks like one tournament too far for so many of their team, really. And there's a lot of class there, but it's veteran class, isn't it? Unfortunately. So I think if Italy are energetic and dynamic with the quality that they have, I imagine they'll find a way of getting through, or at least avoiding defeat, which is all they need to do, as you say.
All right. I mean, they did look energetic and free-flowing in the first game against Albania. Probably much more than Croatia did, actually. But this potentially our last look in tournament football at Luka Modric and perhaps one or two other names as well. Although I feel like we've said that before in other tournaments.
We definitely have said that before. Yeah. But look, I think they need to shake up the team a bit. He did, remember, in the last game against Albania, make some changes at half-time, and it did inspire the comeback from Croatia. Obviously, they conceded late on, but yeah, I would like to think that the manager recognises where the flaws are and that maybe he will add a little bit more youth to the starting 11, because I agree with Dom, they're creaking a bit.
All right, the other game in that group, played simultaneously 8 o'clock on Monday night, is Albania against Spain. Spain, as mentioned, have already won the group, so they will be facing one of the third place sides in their last 16 clash. Rodri suspension klaxon, Spanish midfielder, will be absent for the game with Albania, and we all know what that means. Dom.
What does that mean? Does that mean that Spain lose?
Spain will definitely lose. The numbers say so. Albania, who surprised us all with that 2-2 draw with Croatia, will be facing this game without their striker Milan Daku, who post-game, in that last encounter, grabbed a megaphone and joined supporters in nationalist chants, which I won't repeat here, but they contain very unpleasant references to Serbia and Macedonia. Daku, Kosovan-born. Obviously, there's been a lot of the very strong sentiments involved in that particular region spilling over in the various clashes that have come from these teams. And so he's now picked up a 2-game ban from that, and various fines have been issued as well to the Albanian FA. Crikey. It would be an extraordinary... Spain are already qualified in first place, so the pressure will be off for them, but Albania, could they?
It's highly unlikely, isn't it? They're willing, they've got good energy, they've got plenty of runners, they've certainly got fight in them, and they'll go for it, but even if Spain put out their second string, you'd imagine they'll have too much quality. After 2 rounds of games, Albania have had the second fewest touches inside the opposition box, 26. One team has had 25. And that's England. That is England.
Is it really?
Yeah, that's England.
Is it really?
Yeah. So
watch what you say, Adrian, because what did you ever win as a
exactly
England international? Which you
How
were.
dare I? Yeah. Well, I was an England schoolboy.
You were an England schoolboy.
I played for the England under-18s
there
once.
You go. Did you win?
We won 7-0 actually against the Swiss.
In which case you got carte blanche, tear into them.
So look, I've done enough of that. There are my other 2 appearances on this podcast during the tournament. But yeah, look, England haven't had many touches in the box, but nor have Albania. And look, this is going to be seriously tough for them. I just wanted to mention Fabian Ruiz. I think that he has been terrific. Like obviously, Lamine Yamal and Nico Williams are getting a lot of court time, and rightly so. But I think in midfield, he's been brilliant in terms of like a little bit of magic with the ball at his feet. But there was another stat that I unearthed before the show. He's won possession more times than any other player at the Euros.
Really?
Yeah, 21 times in 2 matches. So he's doing a little bit of everything. So yeah, very impressed by him.
Okay. Dom, do you want a hot take on Albania, Spain, or do you want to give us your view on the big Kane-Gary Lineker debate?
Oh, let's go Kane Lineker. Come on.
Come on then, Dom. Team Kane or Team Gaz?
I have to say I'm edging a bit towards Team Gaz, to be honest. I don't really see why pundits have to be cheerleaders. There seems to be some kind of unwritten rule amongst the players, led by Kane here, that where if you've played for England, like Adrian has, you're not allowed to criticise.
That is a loose.
Hey, come on! I'm allowed to twirl. If you've played for them, if you've worn the shirt, then you shouldn't. You're part of some. You are part of an exclusive club, but that means that you should never criticise that club. Well, that's not really how it works. The pundits are there to critique what they see. I don't think anybody could have watched that game against Denmark and been impressed, particularly with the performance. So I think all the players will have left that pitch knowing that the criticism was going to come their way. The language is a bit fruitier on podcasts because we can all swear on podcasts, can't we?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Dom. I thought Kane's remarks, he did express himself well, and it was quite nuanced the way that he gently reminded Gary that he hadn't won anything either. And it was pretty mild compared to... I always remember Christian Vieri coming out in the 2004 Euros when Italy were getting a bit of stick in the press before their own untimely exit. And he basically he came into the press conference and addressed, 30 journalists and stuff, said, "You are not men. When I get up in the morning, I can look myself in the mirror. None of you can." Just magnificent.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah. On that, because Kane had said that that he was trying to make us feel sorry for the players.
Yeah.
In regards to look, the players see this and they respect these guys because they look. We all looked up to these players when we were kids growing up, and now you're upsetting us because you're telling everybody how badly we did. And I just thought that was. I just agree with Dom. I just think that as a professional athlete, a sportsman at the very highest level, you've got to be able to take criticism and use it as fuel.
There you go.
To improve.
Pin those words on the dressing room wall, Gareth Southgate. England have the chance to give their response, speaking the language of football, on Tuesday when they take on Slovenia. What a match that is set to be. Dom, enjoy your futuristic and slightly dystopian Blade Runner-esque backdrop as you live it up there in Frankfurt. Where are you off to next?
Stuttgart on Wednesday to see Belgium versus Ukraine.
Oh, well, what a game that's set to be as well. Dom, thank you so much for being with us this evening. Thanks, Adrian, as well. Our thanks also to Kieran and Seb and James Horncastle, Liam and producer Charlie in the booth. That brings us to the end of today's Totally at the Euros, but of course there'll be one in about 24 hours' time, so I do hope you'll be joining us for that, listener. For now, from all of us here, it's goodbye. The Totally Football Show podcast is available 3 times a week, bringing you all the football news you could reasonably be expected to care about. We've got views, we've got stats, we've got analysis, we've got some of the best football writers around, and the whole thing is absolutely free. So have a listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or all the usual places by clicking on the link below.